presentation on the 2022 budget will follow from the City Deputy Treasurer. We will then proceed with questions from residents. Finally, councillors will share their final thoughts on Budget 2022. The plan is to conclude by 8:30 this evening. Le format pour ce soir est le suivant. Nous commencerons avec quelques remarques par chaque conseiller. Une présentation sur le budget 2022 suivra. Par la suite, nous passerons aux questions des résidents. Finalement, les conseillers partageront leurs réflexions finales sur le budget 2022. Nous voulons conclure la consultation à 8h à 20h30. We'll now start by hearing from each of the councillors. Alors, nous allons maintenant commencer avec des commentaires et des courtes paroles par chaque conseiller. Councillor Brockington will now say a few words. J'aimerais maintenant inviter le conseiller Brockington à prendre la parole.
Thank you, Madame Fisher. Thank you for moderating tonight's session. To my colleagues and all members of the community, good evening to you. Although we're meeting virtually, I do want to acknowledge we are on the ancestral territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations people, not just their ancestral territory, but territory that was never ceded and never surrendered. The City of Ottawa budget, both operating and capital, is approximately $4.5 billion. It's a significant amount of money. And no level of government impacts, shapes, molds, communities, streets, families like the municipal government. About 85% of all government services that we use come from the city government. It's critical that we are engaged, that we provide input, that you hold elected members accountable, and that the budget reflects the priorities of our community and of our city. And I take this matter very, very seriously. I'm here tonight to listen. I'm here tonight to listen to your priorities, to take note what matters to you and your family and your community, and to ensure that collectively as elected members, we reflect that in the budget that's coming. So I wanted to keep my comments brief. I'm very happy you're joining us tonight, and I'd be happy to take your questions a little bit later. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd now like to invite Councillor Cloutier. Alors, le conseiller Cloutier, vous avez la parole.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. And like Councillor Brockington said, wherever we're logging in from this evening, we are here to discuss the budget. But it's important to acknowledge where this city is located. La ville d'Ottawa a été construite sur le territoire non cédé du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. Et les peuples de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe vivent sur ce territoire depuis des millénaires. Nous rendons hommage à tous les peuples des Premières Nations, les Inuits, les Métis, ainsi qu'à leurs précieuses contributions passées et présentes sur ce territoire. And good evening, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight and to engage with the city. Merci à tous ceux de votre participation ce soir. Soyez à l'aise de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. And thank you, Kathy, and finance staff, Isabel, Jasmine, and her colleagues for your support this evening. Though tonight's budget consultation is an annual conversation for our offices and yourselves, it's important to know that every day is an opportunity to discuss the budget and the resources with your councillors' offices, whether it's the 2022 budget conversation that continues tonight or the 2023 budget process that will start again very soon. As you've heard from Councillor Brockington, tonight is the opportunity for us to listen to you and for an exchange of ideas and to elaborate on the process your city undertakes every year to keep the city running. We're always listening. I'd like to hear how your comments tonight stacks up and with other elements that I've been hearing from residents throughout the year on roads and infrastructure, parks and green space, winter maintenance, housing, climate investments, paratranspo and transit. If we don't get to your questions or comments tonight, or if you would feel more comfortable having a less open forum to exchange, please always feel free to contact me, whether it's about the 2022 budget or anything else. Any other issue that you have a concern about, my staff and I are happy to connect with you. And with that, I appreciate that my colleagues Sarah and Michael are with me tonight taking notes. Merci, Kathy. Thank you.
Merci, Conseiller Cloutier. I would now like to invite Councillor Deans to say a few words. Conseillère Deans.
Merci, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous. I want to add to the land acknowledgement that my colleagues did. I want to recognize that we are meeting tonight on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. I'm City Councillor Diane Deans, and I'm the proud councillor for Gloucester Southgate Ward. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time this evening to attend the South Ottawa budget consultation. I believe that it's imperative for me and my colleagues to listen to what you have to say, to hear directly from our residents, and I look forward to understanding more about your needs and priorities and how we should manage the City of Ottawa budget in 2022. As I'm sure we can all appreciate, there are many challenges facing our city this coming year. When looking ahead at our budget, we must consider how we will manage the many demands we are facing, including the increased costs from the COVID-19 pandemic and the social issues and inequities that the pandemic has really put under a spotlight. Now, more than ever, we need to be judicious about how we spend every tax dollar. Our focus cannot simply be on the bottom line. We need to balance the budget pressures we're facing and ensure we are investing in improving community safety and well-being, providing core services, reliable transit, affordable housing, affordable programs, maintaining infrastructure, and so much more. I look forward to the meeting and the staff's presentation, and I especially look forward to hearing from each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. I'd like to invite Councillor Menard to say a few words. Conseiller Menard.
Thanks very much, Kathy. It's nice to see everybody here today, and appreciate all the land acknowledgements by my colleagues. I think it's important not just to do a land acknowledgement, but to reflect that in our decision making. There couldn't really be a bigger decision coming up than the Taywin expansion, which many Algonquins have emailed us today and yesterday opposing that expansion. So I hope that that is reflected truly in our decisions tomorrow when we vote on things, and not just give a land acknowledgement, but reflected in our decisions. I've been on record before, and I'm going to sound a little bit different than my colleagues. I'm very glad you're here, but I believe the budget process is quite broken. Unfortunately, once the budget comes out, it doesn't change much, if at all. And so I hope that through this and my council colleagues here, we see some changes that can come from this, but we really need to move to more of a participatory style and one that reflects what the community is telling us in the budget, because it is your budget. And I haven't been seeing that as much, unfortunately, over the last decade. I do hope that that changes in the future, so that the budget doesn't, that reflects truly what people are saying in our consultation. So I'll give you some advice about how to change that when we move to committee of the whole, for example. If a lot of people are saying the same thing from across different communities, we can usually get a few changes in. I'm just being realistic and honest with you about how the process works. So I hope that we can organize together, and really appreciate you all being here. It does matter. I just hope we can coalesce around a few key priorities that the four councillors here, can collectively push with our colleagues. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Menard. Next is a presentation on the city's 2022 budget from the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, Isabelle Jasmine. Alors, nous allons maintenant procéder avec une présentation sur le budget 2022 par Isabelle Jasmine, la trésorière adjointe de la Ville d'Ottawa. La parole est à vous, Jasmine. Over to you, Jasmine.
Isabelle.
Sorry, Isabelle.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I just. Okay, merci beaucoup. So my name is Isabelle Jasmine, and I'm the Deputy City Treasurer, and my team is responsible for pulling together the budget for the city. I will be giving a short overview of the city's budget, its composition, the budget process, and ways in which you can provide input to that process. La présentation va être en anglais, mais vous pouvez poser vos questions en français et je peux répondre en français. Next slide, please. So there's an overarching framework for determining how much needs to be collected from taxes to pay for city services. We can work backwards from a tax target or build up to a number, but really it is best to start with a target to make sure budgets remain affordable. The city must estimate and determine any increases to expenditures resulting from inflation, increases from collective agreements, changes in regulation, legislation, growth to service new neighborhoods, and changes in funding from other levels of government. These are then offset by savings from efficiencies that can be achieved from operations, increases in revenues from fees that are charged directly to users of city services, and taxes from new assessment that particularly help to pay for increased operating infrastructure costs to service new neighborhoods. This year, we also have to consider any additional budget pressures we expect from continuing to operate in a COVID pandemic environment if it continues into 2022. Next slide. So the total operating budget for 2021 was $3.94 billion. Close to 60% of the operating budget is made up of 4 key services: water and sewer, police services, transit, and community and social services. Much of the revenue for these services comes from other sources other than tax. Water and sewer is paid for by revenue from the water bill. Half of transit operating costs are paid for by fare revenue, and over 80% of community and social services are paid for by provincial and federal funding. Roughly 14% of the operating budget goes towards capital cash reserves to help pay for infrastructure renewal and growth. 9% of the 14% is for tax supported services, and the other 5% is for water and sewer services. The remaining 32% of the budget covers all other services delivered by the city. Next slide. Here you can see that just over 50% of the revenue comes from taxes and payment in lieu of taxes. Another 21% comes from federal and provincial grants, 22% from fees and charges such as the water bill, transit fares, and parks and recreational fees. Next slide. The capital budget for 2021 was $780.7 million. The high asset intensive areas are primarily for water and sewer services, transit and transportation, which includes roads. 60% of the capital budget for tax supported services is for the renewal or replacement of aging infrastructure. And on the rate side for water and sewer and stormwater, it's 91% for the renewal of assets. The remainder is for growth, which is primarily funded by development charges. And there's also a number of projects identified for regulatory or strategic initiatives. What is not included in this total are projects of strategic importance that are not approved as part of the budgeting process, but require a separate report and approval from council. Examples include the light rail project or the central library. Next slide. As you can see here, 64% of capital funding comes from the cash reserves put aside as a capital contribution from the operating budget. The remainder of the capital program is funded by debt, funding from other levels of government, and development charges. Debt is an important source of funding for capital projects. It helps the city to build now for future benefit, thereby better distributing the cost of the asset to taxpayers that will benefit from the asset today and in the future over the life of the asset. Next slide. This slide is intended to show that there is very little discretion to reduce spending for many of the city's services. The police budget is tabled separately, and council does not have discretion to make line item changes. They can only approve or reject the budget in its entirety. Budget reductions in other areas like transit, fire, paramedics, and roads must be accompanied by changes in service standards. There's also a long list of services or expenditures where there is no discretion because these services are mandated, regulated, or mandatory, such as long-term care, public health, housing, and debt charges. There's a little more discretion in areas funded by fees, where the fees can be increased to recover the cost of delivering the service, or in areas where there are no specific service standards or for administrative support services. Next slide. So council approved the budget directions for 2022, which are summarized here. The municipal tax target was set at 3% overall, including citywide tax levy of 2.6%, auto police services levy of 3%, transit levy at 4.5%, and the transit levy is a little bit higher because it includes another additional $5 million increase to the contribution for capital to replace the canceled provincial gas tax increase. There's also annual additional taxation revenues from growth, which are forecasted at 1.4% in the directions report and recently been increased to 1.7%. Rate programs increased revenue by 4.86% overall as per the long-range financial plan for water, wastewater, and storm. User fees and charges increased in accordance with the fiscal framework or the long-range financial plan, including any incremental COVID-19 cost recovery fees. The capital budget is developed in accordance with the direction outlined in the 2019 background study, the long-range plan, and fiscal framework. Next slide. So the budget directions were approved on July 21st, and public consultations are taking place throughout October. All budgets will be tabled with council and the various boards and commissions on November 3rd. From that date to December 8th, the individual budgets for each committee, board, and commission are reviewed. It is at these meetings that the public has another opportunity to provide feedback and input on the budget via public delegations. Then the budget is approved by committee of the whole and council on December 8th. Individual committees have the flexibility to make recommendations to make budget changes that could be funded from reductions in other committee budgets. Final approval of these recommendations would be made on December 8th by council. Next slide. This is a list of the budget meetings at which public delegations can provide input and recommendations. The list can be found on the city's website, and it is updated if there are any changes made to these dates. And last slide. There are several resources available to you and ways that you can provide input to the budget throughout the year. Engage Ottawa provides a comprehensive online engagement platform that allows you to connect the city in an interactive manner. To provide input, you can complete the online survey, send comments via Engage Ottawa, or contact your councillor. You can also get additional information on the city's website at ottawa.ca/budget. All feedback is reviewed and considered. Your participation in this public meeting today is greatly appreciated, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have on this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Merci beaucoup, Isabelle. Before we begin the question and answer session for this evening, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Alors, quelques détails administratifs. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand using the raise hand function. The raise hand function is located at the bottom of your screen. And if you're calling by phone, press *9. Si vous souhaitez poser une question, s'il vous plaît, levez votre main en utilisant la fonction « Levez la main » qui se trouve au bas de votre écran ou faites la touche étoile 9 si vous nous joignez par téléphone. When it's your turn to ask a question, I will state your name as it appears, and you will receive a message from me on your screen requesting that you unmute yourself. Lorsque ce sera votre tour pour poser une question, je vais dire votre nom et vous recevrez un message sur votre écran qui vous demandera d'activer votre microphone. You can also ask a question using the chat function. I will read and direct these questions to our panelists. Vous pouvez également poser une question en utilisant la fonction questions et réponses de Zoom. Les questions seront répondues par nos intervenants ce soir. If we are not, or if the panelists are not able to answer all your questions, or if you think of something after the session has ended, please get in touch with your ward counselor. Alors, si nous ne sommes pas en mesure de répondre ou si les intervenants ne sont pas en mesure de répondre à vos questions ou si vous pensez à d'autres questions suite à la conclusion de cette session, veuillez rejoindre votre conseiller. So the floor is open for questions. My apologies for that. So I'm going to go through. We have a question from John Redden. I'm sorry. We have a question from John Reed.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. And let me start by expressing thanks to councillors who push for Ottawa to meet the challenging net zero greenhouse gas targets, which should be #1 priority for the city. In fact, I'm rather dismayed that there is no parallel greenhouse gas budget along with the financial budget that we are seeing tonight. Now, to my question, given that OPL isn't just the main library serving downtown with money being poured into the new building, it's a system with long-standing underserved areas. River Ward east of Rideau has been a library service gap for decades. The OPL administration stonewalls. There's been no action on that. Dedicated cycling pathways are springing up, and that's good. But Hunt Club to Walkley along Riverside is a gap. There's no action on that. I've pointed the city to a subsided, unmaintained pathway several times. It's a cut through to the nearest OC Transpo stop. For people who use buses, you need to be able to get there. But there's been no action on that, and I get no feedback from the city when I point that out. We've seen no action on resurfacing Hunt Club and Riverside roads that were promised this year. So my question, how do you and we know that our city is being run efficiently? And how do you and we know that our wards are receiving equitable consideration? Thank you.
Ms. Fisher, do you mind if I take that, given I'm the ward councillor?
Yes, please.
So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reed, for your questions and observations. As a member of the local community association, we certainly work together on a number of projects. So I'll in the interest of time, I'm going to give very brief answers to each matter. I don't think the city's initiatives related to our GHG target should be tied to what the hydro dividend is. If the hydro dividend goes down, we shouldn't decrease our spending and initiatives for our GHG plans. It needs to be constant. And I think there are some like minds on council who can this budget cycle look at investing more to achieve more. It's an absolute return on investment. It's short-term immediate money now that's going to have long-term impacts and effects, positive effects, and I'm certainly supportive in that regard. Ottawa Public Library, I agree about the gap. There's, as you know, a facilities master plan that's about to get underway that will review the city as a whole and look for those gaps, and then plan out how we as a city go forward in that regard. Hunt Club and Riverside Drive were slated in sections to be repaved. There's been a significant delay in what's called utility locate work across the city for a number of projects where the city has to identify all the utilities underneath the street before any digging can happen. There's significant delays with labor and other COVID challenges, and projects like this have been pushed to the spring of next year. So it is slated to be done. The money is there. It will be done. And I'm supportive in that regard. And then bike lanes on Riverside connecting Western Hunt Club with the Mooney's Bay pathway. This is my #1 bike infrastructure project in the ward. There are two possibilities. One, you run a pathway along the river up to about Revelstoke, and then you have to get on Riverside, or you use the utility pathway system that parallels the sidewalk and go there. So staff and I have been working on this for about 2 years. It's very expensive if you go underneath the bridge. We can get into that more later, but this is my #1 project, and I continue to push this project. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll proceed to the next person on the list. We have Pavel Petkov.
Kathy, may I just for one moment, I just want to ensure you had called on John Reddens and he lowered his hand. So I'm not sure where he was on the list, but if you could ensure that you call on in the appropriate sequence.
It's interesting what happened on my sequencing here, but Pavel, if you may, I'm going to hold off with your question and I will proceed with John Redden. So with that, I will, now if I can just, Nathan, can you help me out and unmute John Redden, please?
I can try 1 second.
It worked.
Thank you.
Oh, you're good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. I'm glad I'm the second person. Last year, I didn't have any time to speak because there were so many participants. With this format, we get more people involved, and I strongly believe that if everyone cares about the city and logs in on this, should have their time to speak. A couple of issues I want to bring up, then I'll ask a question. Police increases there is going to increase a significant increase in is there going to be an increase in social services? The transfers from the province, I strongly believe, are going to other places to cut shortfalls. Supreme Court of Canada opened municipalities for lawsuits for improper snow removal. Where's the plan for that? Are we going to increase the capacity to improve the snow removal in certain areas, especially in Alta Vista, Jean? Light rail fiasco. It looks like LRT is going to be shut down for a while. Where is the plan to increase capacity without punishing the users? Paratranspo, we're suffering all the time. We're getting pushback. The online booking system, we got an email today. The people that are testing is November 1st. We found $15 million for lawyers. $15 million to sue this P3 contract for the sinkhole, but you can't find you keep increasing our fares. People are tired of it. We have last 3 months I worked for a company called Access Now. We mapped the city of Ottawa for accessibility. So you can go to accessnow.ca or .com. I can't remember well offhand. The infrastructure in this city for people with disabilities on sidewalks, roads, crossings are a disaster. And they deserve respect. I have to compliment Jeff Leeper. We did a section in his ward where there was about a 4-kilometer stretch of all lockstone. It was the best we can do on wheelchairs and walkers. And I just want to know, how could we, last several years, you're agreeing only to 2.5 to 3% increases. Well, those very little increases are punishing us now. What is your plan? What is your suggestion to improve it? Thank you.
Kathy, can I start and
then other councils can,
sure.
can join in. Thank you.
John, thank you very much. You brought up a couple of things. I'll address a few: the police and the maintenance quality standards and paratransport, if you want. And like many on council, I've been very aware of the conversation happening with the Ottawa Police Services Board, and Chair Deans is here tonight. And as Isabel said, it has a system that is a little bit different from other departments, linked through the overall budget process, but where we can't change line items. I am hopeful that the police service under Chief Slowly, as he stated publicly and again last night, is sincerely looking how to restructure and rebalance the police service to respond appropriately to calls for service, and to build those partnerships with the communities and with organizations that to rely on and to fund them appropriately. As you might be aware, I proposed a motion that will be considered when council discusses the budget, that any difference between whatever is determined for the police budget and the 3% target will be distributed to community partners, like you've said, that's involved in mental health response and working with marginalized groups and neighborhoods. Perhaps Chair Deans will want to say more about those community partnerships a little bit later on. With respect to, I did see the article with respect to the Supreme Court and winter maintenance and the ability of individuals to sue cities. And we did have a conversation with several city departments about that when I saw that come out on earlier this week. As you might know, maintenance quality standards are being looked at. We're going to get that report this fall for implementation in the winter of 2022, 2023. And certainly from mobility, from an economic development, from safety and security, environmental, we do have to improve the maintenance quality standards so that people can get around safely in whatever mode of transportation that they choose. John, you mentioned LRT. I'm without words with respect to the LRT. In the memo we saw today that the full return to service would only be on November 26th. There will be a partial return to service. We need the LRT to work right. The transit is an engine of economic development, of inclusivity, and of environmental sustainability. So we need it to work right. Paratranspo, John, you and I speak a lot about paratranspo. I ask about it almost every transit commission meeting. I didn't last time, and you mentioned that, and you are right. Paratranspo customers need their place at the transit commission, and the issues with respect to the online booking app needs to come as quickly as possible. And I appreciate that you are on the working group, John, that is testing that. I didn't know about the email you received today, but I'd be happy to discuss that further with you. Thank you.
Merci, Jean. Councillor Deans?
I'm not going to add a lot because I know there's a lot of people want to ask a question, but on police, the Police Services Board sets the police budget. We were directed to set the budget by City Council at 3% plus the growth number, which Isabel can confirm, but I believe growth this year in the city is at 1.7%. So that was a basic direction that the board was given. The board has taken a different approach to setting the budget. What we have said is we want to start at 0%, and for any increase that the service is requesting from the taxpayers, from the public purse, that they need to provide a full justification of why that money is needed to provide adequate and effective policing in the city of Ottawa, which is the mandate given to us by the province in legislation. So that is high level, the approach the board has taken. We don't know where the service is going to land when they table their budget on November the 3rd. It's going to be set on November 22nd. So we will have that time to go through that budget and see if we believe that it's doing what we require them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. We're going to move to Pavel Petkov. Over to you, Pavel.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, clearly.
Yes, so I just really personally have one question, issue that I would like to bring up. This is something that I've emailed the city councilors about. I think it was Mr. Shawn Menard that I spoke over email, but basically my biggest concern is roads. The state of the roads in the city is nothing short of downright atrocious. Like I have traveled, I've been to many places around the world, and these are some of the worst roads I've ever seen in my life, and definitely the worst ones in all of Canada. And we're the capital city of the country. So I was just wondering if there's any plans to increase the budget for road maintenance infrastructure, or maybe look at how things are done differently, perhaps hire a different company that does do these, all the road maintenance, someone that doesn't simply go for the cheapest thing, but actually does quality work, because it does affect a lot of things. You know, somebody was here, one of the councillors in her opening notes was mentioning community safety and reliable public transportation. Well, roads and their quality affects all of these things. You know, the public transportation, that's a lot of wear and tear and maintenance that would have to be performed on on the buses, whatnot. And safety, it's just downright dangerous to go through a pothole that's 6 inches over, going like 70 or 80 kilometers an hour. Your wheel is just waiting to fly off. And, so yeah, that's really my biggest concern. And I'd like to know what the city council could speak to that about.
Thank you, Pavel.
I can jump in if you'd like, Kathy.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thanks, Pavel, for the question. So a few things to mention. The first is that we have a lot of roads in Ottawa. We're a very big city, but we also expand our roads to a great degree through development charges, through expansions of the urban boundary, and we do road widening often as well. And that is very expensive. It's not just expensive on the capital side, but it's expensive to operate and maintain it over time. The issue is we should be fixing the roads we have, in my view, and not continuing to expand roads, which we know doesn't work because it induces more demand. It means that if you widen a road or expand it further, you induce more people to drive because you're providing more capacity to drive rather than switch to alternative modes of transportation. And so if we continue to expand our road network, our roads will continue to get worse and worse and worse. We have to rein in our capital spending on road expansions and focus on the operating side. Our operating budget for road maintenance has been going up year after year. It goes up incrementally though, and clearly it's not keeping pace with demand. There's two things that I would mention. One is in discussions with our staff, and our road maintenance staff are very good. I must say, we work with them regularly. They are high quality road maintenance staff, but they can't keep up with all the demand out there. And so there's two things. One is if a road is scheduled to be redone, so a road can either be completely redone with the sewers and the water infrastructure underneath, a complete renewal of a road. City staff will wait for that time so as to maximize efficiency for when that occurs. Or if there's another alternative, and that's just a resurfacing, a complete resurfacing. And so there's a schedule, asset management schedule for when a resurfacing may take place that is not the underground infrastructure. So it's also, you can find out when your road is scheduled to be resurfaced. Email your councillor, there's online maps, and we can also find out timing as well. And then the third one is the potholes, right? The filling of potholes. So it always helps if there's particularly really, really bad areas, send a note and just give the exact coordinates of it. We'll get on it. We'll get staff to be on it. But I have to say that the issue is not so much our maintenance staff and keeping up. It is how many roads we continue to expand and how much that costs the city to operate year after year as we continue to expand. So unless we start to rein that in, we're going to continue to have this problem. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Shawn. We're going to proceed with a question from Angela. Angela, just a moment. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, I think
Go ahead.
you can hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry if I look to the side. I've been trying to write down my question to be more succinct. So I have three related questions on the topic of climate. And I'm speaking both as an individual resident in Capital Ward, as well as the executive director of CAFES, which is Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. It so happens that the organization and my personal opinion exactly coincide on these issues. So my first question is, what is the expectation in our Department of Finance municipally on interest rates and inflation over the next 5 and 10 years? The reason why I would like to know this assumption and analysis is because we have the climate emergency, we have a climate plan, It has been costed at a high level. We know that many of the investments needed will have a positive return, but obviously we need to borrow to make the capital investments. So my thinking is that our expected rate of inflation, especially if it's going up, is very important in urging us to do things sooner while interest rates are low. And I want to check that kind of thinking with you. Second of all, effectively, the City of Ottawa year on year has cut our climate expenditure by well over 50%. So climate budget has gone to less than half of what it was last year. It was 2-point-something million, and now it's 700 or 800 million. So I don't think that's okay. And by the theory that money talks and tells you where are the real priorities of an administration and of a local government, then I would say that the city has decided that climate change is decreasing in priority. So would you agree that this read of the administration is correct, is my second question. And then the third question is, we know that there's no long-term financial plan for the climate, for how we're going to execute the climate plan. So the question is, do we have the capacity in the Department of Finance for climate and sustainable finance expertise to devise a complex financial plan that involves debt, risk, raising capital via green bonds, negotiating with other levels of government, crown corporations, etc.? And if we do not have this capacity or expertise, I would recommend that we add a human resources component in the operations budget and then task the Department of Finance with developing a long-term climate plan and also a carbon budget.
Thank you, Angela. And who would like to start with answering the questions raised by Angela?
So I can answer question
Yeah.
1 and 3, I think.
Thank you.
So in terms of interest rates and inflation, obviously inflation is going growing quite a bit with the pandemic. We're not sure where it's going to land. So we're not trying to predict inflation going forward, but certainly over the past 2 years, it's gone up significantly. And in terms of interest rates, they have been at historical lows and likely will start to increase gradually over the years. When we look at debt and what we can afford for debt, it's not the amount of debt, it's how much we can afford in interest. And so it's each year we budget for debt servicing. And if interest rates go up, we can issue less debt. But if interest rates go down, we can issue more debt. So that's the basis for how we finance. It's based on what we can afford, based on what we raise in taxes. And then the third question, the Transportation Master Plan and Infrastructure Master Plan will be coming forward in 2023 and 2024. We are hoping to align that with the climate change plan also. So these plans will have that component built in, and all our future long-range financial plans will consider those green investments going forward. As part of our capital budgeting, all our capital decisions and budgets and expenditures look to green a lot of those investments. So we looked at greening the fleet, electric buses. We just invested $4.6 billion in LRT. So a lot of our capital expenditures do consider the GHG emissions, and more recently the library, which is LEED certified and zero emission.
Thank you, Isabel.
Kathy, if I can just add, Angela, thank you, and thank you for your work on the environment and your presence at the Environment Committee and in its work. I was just going to bring up two small issues. As you know, I think the city has a target that by 2040 or 2050, I'm sorry, I don't remember, that we get to net zero GHGs. It's an unfunded plan as it stands now, but those are the targets, and I know that you were present when Environment Committee discussed those and discussed that plan, and it will take a lot of partnerships. it's acknowledged that the province and the federal government need to participate in this. The city cannot do it on its own. What the city can do, and I'm going to refer to a small and a large project, a small project that was passed at Environment Committee with respect to water management on laneways and making them more permeable, and the grant that's available for that. It's just an example of a smaller project. A larger project that is not found in any environment budget, but is certainly a commitment by the city with respect to making the entire OC Transpo bus fleet all electric by 2032, I believe it is, that it will be fully converted. That will have a major impact on our environment, but that is not something that you would find in the budget of the environment department. It has implications across a multitude of departments. So I just wanted to provide that context, but thank you for your comment, Angela.
Thank you, Jean.
I'll just add to take your fundamental point. There needs to be a steady stream of funding that exists for other priorities within energy evolution and the key implications within the climate change master plan that we don't have right now. So we've been relying on the Hydro Ottawa dividend surplus. That is an unstable funding source. We need to have a stable funding source that actually allows us to convert housing and our buildings, as well as transportation systems that then save us money and reinvest that funding into other areas that, again, save us money over time. So it's important to lower GHG emissions. And while you're doing that, there can be savings that can be allocated to other opportunities, like changes in our building envelopes and efficiency of transportation. Our fleet services, for example, with our bylaw vehicles, police vehicles, these are things that can and should be reformed to be lower emission and can save money doing time. I also think we don't need a lot of those vehicles that they do have right now too. So in any event, I appreciate the question and lots more work to do there. Thanks, Angela, for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor. Now proceed with the question from Jake Cole. Jake, over to you.
Hi there. Thank you for allowing me to speak. First off, I have to tell you that I'm not a member of any of your wards. I hope that doesn't preclude me from asking this question, but I think the question applies to anybody actually who lives in the city of Ottawa, and particularly in your wards. I think the situation I'm going to describe probably is as bad there as it is anywhere else. I'm talking about air pollution, and I'd just like to throw a couple of facts your way just to kind of stir the pot a bit. How many people do you think die prematurely each year from air pollution in the city? Does anyone have an idea? What if I told you that Health Canada tells us that about 500 people die prematurely each year from air pollution in this city? And what if I asked you how many people died from COVID-19 last year, 2020, from COVID-19? How many people died in the city? Wouldn't you know it? About the same number. About 500 people died in Ottawa from COVID-19 in 2020. So here we have two situations, COVID-19, which is all people all hear about these days. Here we have air pollution, which is killing just as many people and actually affecting all of us to some degree. And yet we do and seem to hear little about air pollution. I'm Jake Cole. I work with the Sierra Club of Canada. We're doing an air pollution project here in the city. Our project is pretty basic. We have meters. We're running around the city trying to find areas where the air is good and where the air is bad. And we're finding a number of sites where the air isn't so good. The province has one air quality station in the city. It's on Wurtemberg Street, just off of Rideau Street, just near where Rideau goes into Vanier. Typically, if you look at that site, you'll find that the readings for air pollution in the city are basically low risk. And yet if you walk along Rideau Street, just about a block away from there, we found readings with our meters that are about 4 or 5 times worse than that, all along Rideau Street. Why would that be? Rideau Street's got a lot of traffic. Rideau Street has a lot of high buildings, which tend to hold the air in. Rideau Street has a lot of construction going on. And as a result, the air pollution along Rideau Street is not very good. I wager most people wouldn't even know that, particularly people who are spending big bucks and buying some of those condos that are being built there.
Jake, sorry for interrupting, but we have many folks who would like to ask a question. So really appreciate the context. But would I be able to ask you if you could ask your question?
Yes.
And as I mentioned earlier, you also have an opportunity. I mean, like, you have some good points that you're making to share those as well with the councillors, because we do want to hear from as many folks as possible.
No, I
But
totally
if you
understand.
if you could raise a question, that would be great. I appreciate
My
it.
question is just simple. Would the councillors feel the need to do something more than what we're currently doing with respect to air pollution in the city? I don't think it's something we can just wave it away. And I have a number of ideas. London, England has done a lot of work in the last 4 or 5 years in this area. They would be a good model to follow. So I have a lot of information I could throw your way. If any of you are interested, I'd be happy to meet with you as a group or individually to explain what we found out and just give you some ideas about things you might consider doing. And perhaps we could chart out some plans to work together on some of these things.
Thank you.
Jake.
My
That would be great.
suggestion, my suggestion would be email all members of council, throw the net out wide. I certainly am interested, and I think some of my colleagues are. So thank you. To be continued.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a question from Robert Bouchard. Robert, over to you. Nathan, I'm trying to ask Robert to unmute. Okay, I think you're good
Okay,
now.
yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot for addressing my question, which is about the high cost of living, which is all over the news these days and which has never been higher in the many years. And the city nicely contributing to that high cost of living by tax increase well above the annual inflation rate. And in the worst case, the astronomical water bill increase of 27% over the last 5 years, which is about 3 times the inflation rate. Why it's important to look at the high cost of living is, in my case, I'm a pensioner, and rest assured that my pension is definitely not increasing at that same level. My concern also, I think, is the city councillor may be over listening to citizens always complaining about never enough services, where the silent majority is footing the bill through tax increase. I remember that Mr. Watson promised tax increase, more manageable tax increase around the inflation rate, which has never been the case. And also we came up with a good principles many years ago that any new idea that someone has should be proportionally compensated by an equivalent saving found somewhere else. I think it's a good principle that we never heard since. So my question, we heard about cost efficiency in the briefing, is how is the city addressing cost efficiency and lowering the taxes to a more manageable level within the inflation rate, because I believe that the current tax and fees increase are unaffordable over the long run. Over.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard.
Kathy, if I may. Merci, Monsieur Bouchard. It's nice to hear from you. It was nice to see you at the end of September. With respect to the water bill, yes, you are correct that there is a long-range financial plan with respect to the water infrastructure and renewing the infrastructure. I have to say that by law, only what is collected on the water bill can only go for the treatment and the distribution of water. It does not go into other revenues. Isabel, I would welcome your further comment on that to give that context. But the water bill pays for water. With respect to the 3% tax increase, if you recall, the original target was 2%, but 1% was added so that we could renew the infrastructure in our city, renew the roads and we had a resident multi-billion-dollar plan so that we can close the gap, so that we can renew and repair the roads, which in some places are in dire need of that attention. I thank you for your intervention. Merci de votre intervention. Je l'apprécie, vos commentaires, and that with respect to the water bill and the rate of the tax increases. Those are my comments.
Yeah, I can add to that, Councillor, and confirm that the water, wastewater, and stormwater are all separate fees actually, and they support those services specifically, so they don't even cross subsidize each other. And it is 100% cost recovery. So monies collected from the water bill go directly to those services and no other services.
Just add on the, oh, sorry.
And I just want to talk about the inflation that we
Sure.
We use. The inflation
Sure.
that the city faces is different than the regular consumer price index. We have a very asset intensive service, and we're very much impacted by construction inflation.
I'll just add to the water bill discussion. My colleagues are absolutely right about the cost going to water specifically, but there is an issue, and that is that our fixed costs have gone up exponentially. And what it has done is not given a lot of incentive to save water, because your bill is almost always the same if you're kind of an individual. No matter how much water you use or not use, the increments are so small that it doesn't entice savings. And so we need to switch that up. All that water bill will still go to water structure. It's how it's defined though, and who's paying what. So if you're an individual kind of renter or homeowner and you're paying the water bill, it'd be nice to have an incentive to save more water. And right now, I don't think we've got that down. So that's one change that I think we should be looking at, end of this term, next term.
Kathy, if I could, I just add a few words. I was listening to what the presenter had to say, and I agree. Our taxes are quite high in Ottawa, and it's council's job to listen to the community and try and strike that right balance between affordability and increases and the public's ability to pay more in terms of their taxes. We have a lot of competing demands on the city of Ottawa. We unfortunately, our taxation is the most regressive form of taxation. Is based on the property value as opposed to your income, like upper tier governments have. And we have a lot of demands on infrastructure, on social infrastructure, to make sure that we're taking care of all of our citizens, and the pot of money is frankly just not enough. And so it's very difficult. It's a difficult task every single year to figure out. I guess you can equate it to a household budget where you have to make tough choices and tough decisions, and that's what council has to do. And so it's important to hear from all of our citizens about what they think that right balance is. And I agree with you, when you're seeing increases of 3% and then you're getting extra increases in other areas like your water bill or your transit bill or what have you, it adds up to a lot of money, and the affordability is certainly a question that council has to consider. When we were setting the budget direction, the direction that council gives to this staff upon which they build a budget, one of the things that I said is, I actually don't think, and Isabel said it tonight, I'm not sure I really agree, but I actually don't think just 7% across the board is the best approach to building a budget in the city of Ottawa, because I don't think that every service has the same weight, and I don't think that every service has the same pressure on it. And so I do think that council really has to consider who could do with less, who needs more, in order to really meet the demands of our citizens in this municipality. And that's really, it's all about balance and finding that, striking that right balance. And that's really the job of council. So I just want to thank all of you for coming out and offering your perspectives tonight, because I think it does really sit with us, and we're reminded of what you say when we're making those tough choices at the council table. So thank you.
I'll just add 2 sentences. Every year I ask the city manager to start the budget process by telling us how he has found savings. It should be part of the budget document. The people of Ottawa should know how the #1 staff member is looking for savings, #1. To Councillor Dean's point, everyone shouldn't get an increase automatically. We have declared priorities. We have a housing emergency. We have a climate emergency. Why are we not making that the priority in our budget? We've already declared it. You're telling us transportation network at all levels is insufficient. So what I've come out of the budget process every year is no one's happy. No one at the end of a budget process in the community appears to be happy. And it's because we're putting little bits, trying to make everyone happy by giving little bits here and there, and we're not focusing our budget on the priorities that our community has set are the priorities in the city. And that's the frustrating part, is I really think it should be zero-based and put the resources where they're needed and where we've said the priorities are. And that's where I want to help move this budget process in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you. We still have quite a few folks who have questions. And so I'm going to ask James Edgar to be the next person. And I'd just like to mention that if you could keep the context of your question succinct and brief, so that and then ask your questions so that we can allow other folks to ask their questions as well. So I appreciate that. Alors, il y a beaucoup de questions, il y a beaucoup de gens qui veulent poser des questions. Alors, si vous pouvez garder le contexte plus bref et demander votre question. Merci.
All right, Kathy, I'll keep it short. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. As many countries and municipalities are scaling back or outright banning artificial turf installation outside of heavy use inner city recreational facilities, not to preamble too much, there are a lot of issues with coating the ground in petrochemicals, environmental impacts, groundwater penetration, et cetera, et cetera. We won't get into the details, but has the city considered what other municipalities in the world are doing in this regard? Have they considered the environmental impact of artificial turf installation, maintenance, cost versus natural turf and the carbon sink that that plant matter is? And my question is, does the city have plans? Have they considered this? And does the city have plans to install more artificial turf with this budget? And further, would they reconsider if there are plans to install more city outside of extreme inner city heavy use situations? Would they reconsider in light of the declared climate emergency?
And who would like to start?
I can mention something if you want me to.
Thank you, Shawn.
So this issue is played out in my community, certainly. The artificial turfs that are used in my area are extensive because we've got Lansdowne, Immaculata Field, and others. And there's a lot of extra heat that's generated there, and concerns with the rubber from tires that is used in these, and then the replacement and properly recycle these materials either. So it is just it's one of many issues the city has to deal with. But at this time, the feedback that I've received from staff is these things are normally replaced through landfilling. There's not a full strategy around them. Now I'll say that we have the solid waste master plan coming up. That's something where I would suggest, James, if you're interested, to plug into. That's going to fundamentally change the way we put out garbage, recycle, green bin, largely household organics within our multi-use buildings, as well as industrial waste. So I'd plug into that process and really start to mention this. And if you have others that are concerned with this, to raise it there, that's our best option to get some change in terms of how much we use these and then how they're recycled afterwards. So appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to proceed with a question from Joan Freeman. Joan, over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the comments a few minutes ago by Councillor Deans and Brockington about priorities. And my question as a concerned citizen, and certainly someone who's worried about the climate emergency and all the other emergencies we're facing, is this in any way a transition budget? To me, it looks very status quo. How is this budget actually moving us to build back and hopefully build back better? It looks like the pots are all allocated the same way as before, and the 3% is the same, and I just don't see where the priorities are. Related to that, I'd like to know what the overall climate budget is. What is the city spending on climate? I know they're spending peanuts, 800,000 on programming, but what are they spending on their, changing their fleet or whatever else they're doing? I have no idea. And I think as a citizen, I should know that. I also think in terms of the water and wastewater, now I don't quite understand what this budget is for, but my observations from looking at what the city's been doing in my neighborhood is that, yeah, they're doing a lot of stormwater stuff, but it's very expensive. Has there been any constant thinking about doing more low-cost natural solutions instead of building all these underground tanks? Why are we not doing more permeable or whatever? These are a lot cheaper. And when I talk to workmen about this, they say, "Oh, wow, that wasn't part of the plan." Finally, in Councillor Brockington's comments about efficiencies, in my observation, if we're building a transition budget, we need to start working across the city and breaking down silos, and that will lead to a lot of efficiency. Again, as a citizen, I've had problems with a tree in my front yard. Hydro comes and hollows it out, and at the same time the tree is busy scraping on my roof, and I have to wait 4 more months to get tree arborists from the city to come to do that. Instead of, there's a same two people doing the same thing, and they're both being hired by me, basically. I see no point in that. Last year, when there was no snow, for a lot of January, there was little snow plows running around, putting so much salt down when we didn't need it. They're going around 4 times a day. It was like you're walking on gravel instead of a sidewalk. So I don't know whether they had some service contract and they had to do this, but it made no sense. So I just think these are tiny little things that we're seeing, but I do think there's efficiencies all over. And part of it is you're all siloed. So I guess I like comments on where is the transition and where's the movement here?
Thank you.
I'll start with the macro question, and then maybe someone that's on the Environment Committee can answer some of the micro questions around the environment. I think in terms of a transition, I would say that this is not a grand transition budget year in the city of Ottawa. We're coming into year 4 of a 4-year council mandate. My perception from where I sit at the council table is that by and large, the die is cast under the leadership of Mayor Watson in the direction that we've been going for the last number of years. I would expect after the next election would be a much bigger opportunity for major transition in terms of our approach. As you know, I'm a longtime member of City Council. I've been at the table a long time. I've seen a lot of budgets, and the way we are setting budgets today is does not allow for a lot of innovative opportunities for budget change or direction. The budget is basically crafted by the city manager in conjunction with the mayor, who consults with members of council in building the budget, but it used to be members of council had a lot more hands-on in the priorities that were being set than we have today. So I would say for this year, in the 4th year of the term, you're not going to see a lot of change. Having said that, I am the chair of the Police Services Board, and I can tell you, well, even though the board was given a direction to build the budget at 3 + 1.7%. Our approach was different. Start at 0 and justify what you need. I think that would probably be a much more innovative approach and for the city as a whole, and would probably allow members of council and the public a lot more opportunity to innovate and break down the silos, as you suggested, Joan, in your comments. So I'll leave it there and let my council colleagues answer the other parts of your question.
Joan, thank you very much for the question. And you mentioned tunnels underground. That's a CSST tunnel, and it's designed to hold sewer and stormwater that would usually go untreated into the Ottawa River. And I think it's very important that we do invest for our community, for our environmental stewardship of the entire area and downstream at the Ottawa River. It doesn't necessarily impact residents of the city of Ottawa, but it certainly impacts our environment, that we do retain that water until it can be treated. And that's the purpose of the CSST. I had provided an example earlier of that program where residents, property owners can retain stormwater on their property. And I absolutely agree with that. And it's an important program so that it is not sent to the sewers, but it is allowed to permeate onto the property and on our laneways. And there's a grant process for that. So again, those are just two small examples, but I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying about silos and the overall budget direction. And I appreciate that you were here this evening.
Any other comments from other councillors?
I'm just wondering if the deputy treasurer could comment on the financial investment that's part of the draft budget.
I don't have the details here in front of me, but I do know we have the $3 million for energy evolution and then the hydro dividends that go towards climate change initiatives. And as I mentioned earlier, as we're doing our capital investments, we're looking to make sure that those investments are green. And the fleet plan just came out looking for committing $1 million per year for greening the fleet.
So Ms. Freeman, I'd be happy to, or directly with your own counselor, get details for you. The thing is, we haven't seen the draft budget. We don't know what the draft budget states or contains. We'll know high level when it's presented at the beginning of November, but I'd be happy to facilitate getting answers to your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'm conscious of the time. Je crois qu'au courant du temps, il est maintenant 8h20. It's 8:20, and we still have many questions from folks from who are participating this evening. I'm hoping to take a couple of more questions, but for those of you who I don't get to, if you would start perhaps writing down some of your questions, because I know that councillors are going to appreciate receiving questions and feedback from you in writing, because the consultations do not end here. Très consciente du temps ce soir, j'espère avoir deux autres questions, mais pour les gens qui ont des questions, j'aimerais que vous que vous écrivez vos questions, puis considérez de les envoyer à votre conseiller, parce que ils sont tous intéressés à vos commentaires et vos rétroactions sur le budget 2022. So with that, avec ça, we're going to go to Stefan Bajinski.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. I was very impressed with the presentation that Isabel Jasmine was doing. However, I have, instead of a large question, I have rather smallish question, maybe even minute, but it relates to all of us in the city, and it relates to the generation that is most important to us, the youth. And my question is, how the city is funding the subsidies for sports activities in the communities? And the second question, which is related to the first, is these communities are being subsidized, these activities being subsidized by the city, and please explain how they are being subsidized, and some of these activities are being insured by the city. And I would like also hear how the city is planning next year to ensure the sports activity within the city. And thank you very much.
Kathy, I'm not sure if the resident is referring to professional sports or amateur sports or recreational sports in our community centers.
Purely, I appreciate that, Councillor. This is purely our community associations that are organizing sports activities. So we are speaking about those events like picnics that also need to be insured. So all this falls into basically what we do in our little community. We just spent money for 1,000 liters of paint where we were repainting old tennis courts with the new pickleball courts. So that's what it is. It's expensive for us, but we would like to have some assistance from the city. Thank you, Councillor.
Just a quick comment. We've seen in the pandemic the importance that our residents attach to our parks, to our recreation facilities when they were not able to access them, our community centers and gyms and pools and those team activities. So thank you very much. I'm not sure which pickleball or tennis court you're referring to. I don't know. But certainly we need
it doesn't matter. What we want to, someone pointed out to the budget where that paragraph is located, that there are probably two little pockets of money, because one is for paying the volunteers that we employ for our events, and the other one is the insurance pocket. So would the Isabel Jasmine help us here, point it out within the budget? Thank you so much.
Mr. Baczynski, maybe I could make a suggestion. If you could tell us what area of the city that your community is in, maybe we could have your member of council work with you to find the appropriate budget line item that might be able to assist you.
With that, thank you for the question. And thank you for the suggestion, Councillor Deans. We're going to proceed now to Mary Huang. Mary, I hope I mentioned your name correctly.
Yeah, that's good. Hi, my name is Mary Huang, and I'll be upfront and saying I'm not actually in the in any of the ward this council was in, but they sent, I mean, Centertown, but we had Centertown Community Association had a workshop, conversation on housing policy with Stephen Pomeroy and Nina Blonder, so I wasn't able to attend Catherine McKinney's session. I would like to ask a question on behalf of my parents who's in the Glebe Center and people like them, seniors. I know when I was looking through the official plan, even like senior was mentioned twice, older adults 7 times, and age inclusive or age friendly maybe half a dozen times. And even though there's an older adult plan, the official plan never mentioned the older adult plan in as something they looked at, as you can tell from the official plan document. So I have a question regarding the budget. Considering that the population of seniors is over 65 is growing, and it is now about 16%, and it was 13% 5 years ago, and it's set to be 20% in 2031 and 25% in 2036. So there's quite a steep increase. And if the budget is only like a 3% increase over previous year, that's going to be underfunding some of the senior initiative. So that's something I would like to ask the people, how the budget is prepared, and also the councillor to make sure that factors like that are not just forgotten and just do a cost plus increase, because that is when there's significant shift like this, a cost plus increase is going to give a lot less funding per capita of the population than it would be for other groups. So this is partially a question about how the budget is prepared and whether there's any look at that when they're giving the guidelines for the budget.
Thank you, Mary.
Don't know if Isabel wants to answer that in terms of the building of the budget, but as a former chair of the older adult plan, I can tell you that we certainly take seriously our aging population in the city. We're very aware of it. We're trying to put new services and policies in place that allow for aging in place of our older population, that allow people to stay in their homes longer and have services available to them. But to your specific point about the population aging faster than the funding for that, I mean, they're funding in many, many envelopes throughout the city that address older adults, for example, the library budget and the Parks and Rec budget. All of those budgets do take into consideration older adults and how we fund their needs through those programs. So I hope at least in part that's an answer to your question.
Yeah, and I could just say, like, developing the budget, we identify the pressures that have come to light throughout the year. So each department identifies, where the programs, the initiatives, requirements are, what decisions have been made by council that impact standards or requirements going forward. We look at inflation, we look at collective agreements, like all the budget pressures are identified. It's a 3% overall increase, but each department's individual pressures are identified, and some of them have higher requirements than others, and some of them are regulatory, and some of them are associated with growth. So you'll also see in our budget, we identify the pressures that are required just to maintain current operations, and then there's also a column that identifies those pressures that are required for the growth. So we do identify all those components and bring them together as a draft budget.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillors, it is now 8:29, and we still have around 6 people on the participants list who have questions, but it's getting late in the evening, and I will defer to you to let me know whether you would like to take one more question or whether you would like to proceed to the closing remarks.
I'm happy to stay and take questions on my own if you'd like. I'm happy to stay till a little bit later.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm happy to stay as well. Maybe we could ask any of the people that have their hands up if their questions could be asked in the chat or sent to us directly to answer them that way. That would be good. Otherwise, if they want their question asked and answered in the public forum tonight, I'm happy to stay and hear the questions.
Alors, oui. Alors, c'est clair, les conseillers sont prêts à rester pour répondre à vos questions, mais si vous aimeriez aussi demander vos questions dans la section du chat de Zoom, vous pourriez le faire, mais nous allons procéder avec les questions. So we're going to proceed with the other questions. So I'm going to proceed with Bessa Whitmore. Bessa, over to you.
Thank you. Very brief question. The city does not have a system of public toilets across the city. So I'm speaking partly on behalf of Gotta Go. There are public buildings with public toilets, but there's no signage. And a very reasonably costed option would be to put signage on where there are public toilets already existing. Libraries, City Hall, museums, Parliament Hill, all those places that already exist. That's a very cheap option. So that's my suggestion and question.
Yep. Bessa, nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I did raise this issue last budget as well. Planning on pushing it again because it's a very pragmatic solution. It doesn't cost much. We just need better signage for people that have to go. And so, the other part that you make about businesses, small businesses that may want more customers in that can offer public rest stops to be able to advertise that more as well is a great point by your campaign. So you've been heard. I did raise it with our infrastructure economic development folks last year. We'll raise it again this budget because the expenditure is not huge. You got to get parks on board. You have to get a few different departments going with it, but really it's a great suggestion. So thanks for making it. Let's keep doing it. If you send me actually just a reminder note, I'll direct it again to our GM of Pied. I think that the name's changed now, but I'll direct that and then we can start the process of pushing one more time. So thank you for your intervention.
Thank you, Bessa, and thank you, Councillor Menard. We will now proceed with a question from Marty Carr. Marty, over to you.
Hi there. Thank you, Kathy. I'll try to make this into a question as much as possible. I'll start with a comment with the full understanding that I understand the constraints that the city is in terms of budget, and I fully don't expect a response to this question or for this to be accommodated in the budget, but, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic. But when we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that we can see, at least in Ottawa South, that three of you, Councillors Brockington, Deans, and Cloutier, have seen an area of the city that has been more impacted by COVID-19 than any other area, and that is Herongate, Ledbury, and Ridgemont, an area that consistently had the highest rate of COVID across the city and that had the lowest vaccination rate. The area of the city that has the second lowest neighborhood equity index in all of Ottawa, with Strathcona Heights being the only other area. It's an area of high density housing with approximately 70% of the people who are immigrants or new Canadians. And it is the area with some of the poorest recreational facilities in all of the city of Ottawa. And it is also an area where we gave up a lot of these recreational facilities throughout the pandemic to house people in need for reasons of homelessness or otherwise. And so I think that was the right choice. But I understand that there is not a lot of wiggle room in this budget, but I think we really need in the future to take a look at these priority areas where there are these inequities, where there are people, these people that live in those neighborhoods are not there tonight. They are not here tonight. They don't have time to come here. We need to look at this area. I know it crosses 3 wards. We need to look at a strategy and investments in this area. We are up against folks that are, and no offense, Councillor Menard, this isn't a comment on the Glebe or Alberta South, but you got high fundraising, I'm just, Rockcliffe, any of these areas where we're up against people fundraising themselves, voices. We need to look at the area with the 3 wards and do something about this for Ottawa South in the future with respect to recreational facilities. I'll just say, I know we've had a couple wins with getting money for Hazelview for the Sandalwood Park and Diane Deans, Councillor Deans with the BCWG, I'm calling it the wrong name, the clubhouse, but there needs to be more of an effort. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Marty.
Maybe I can
Marty, if I can, Marty, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your comments. Yes, the pandemic has certainly highlighted the disparity of opportunity and of being able to navigate something like the pandemic and to make sure that people can live safely and comfortably. But thank you for your comment. Thank you for your leadership in Alta Vista.
Councillor
Maybe
Deans.
just a couple of words from me on this. I certainly recognized long before the pandemic that I represent an area of the city that is high needs, that is high density, that is low income, that is single parent, family led in many cases, that has a high new Canadian population. And I worked on a program that we introduced to the city called Building Better Revitalized Neighborhoods, brought a community kitchen to the area that I represent, as well as work to save the property that's now becoming BGC Ottawa in my ward. Got a complete street developed there with better transit priority than it's had in the past, and are continuing to work on a lot of the issues that you raise. And I recognize that it's not just about my ward. The 3 wards, as you quite correctly point out, are a hub, and that we need to continue to build that. I think you will see more changes coming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Nous allons procéder avec une question de Sylvain de Margerie. Sylvain?
Voici. Thank you very much for hearing me. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and it follows Marty's comments. We are in one of the most catastrophic worldwide situation that we've seen for decades, if not half a century, with COVID. It has made surface problems with our social network and community support systems. And most of what I hear tonight is same old, same old. What are the councillors doing, or what is the city planning to adapt to a new environment? You must admit that the value of our properties has risen significantly. We're doing good that way. Those people that have investments, their investments grew more in the last year than they ever did before. And the inflation rate is raising, but actually through investments, we're getting return for that. On the other hand, the people who don't have investments, the people that are on welfare and so on, have only seen negative impact from this. And the pandemic is exaggerating or increasing the separation between those who have and those who have not. It's a new environment, and what is the city planning to address that?
Thank you, Sylvain.
Monsieur de Margerie, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And certainly with the city, with respect to our the tax foncière and property tax system, you know, la marge de manœuvre is pretty limited. We saw with respect to Isabelle's presentation the very limited discretionary spending that an organization like the city has. We do rely, as was stated with the housing emergency, we do rely on the federal and provincial government who have much higher taxing powers than the city does. So, but thank you for your comment. And I will point out to everyone who's on the call, if you have time, go to Food for Thought Cafe, Matière et Réflexion, and just note the work that Monsieur de Margerie does in the community to support a broad sector of the community with respect to his knowledge of food and his knowledge of cooking. And I thank him profoundly for his work in the community. I wish I had a better answer.
Merci, Monsieur Cloutier.
Merci, Monsieur de Margerie.
We will now proceed to a question from Chris Nanda. Chris, over to you.
Hi, thanks a lot for this opportunity to provide input. And I've got two questions, and one's a call. I guess it's a question, and the other is just a call to do something. The first thing is just call for funding for an environmental assessment for an overpass, a pedestrian overpass. I believe it's 1.5 million, which would connect Ottawa train yards and the Via station. This has been in the plans as part of the original site approval for a link when the Ottawa train yards project was approved in 2001. This is, from what I understand, and I know I've spoken to our own councillor on this many times, so he knows my position, and I believe he's supportive, is to have something that would set the stage to be able to get funding from both levels of government, or at least the federal government, for active transportation, because this is a missing link in and I think given the climate change and climate emergency, these sorts of projects need to be priorities as a way of getting people out of cars. When it's constructed, this overpass would link the Ottawa train yards with the Via station and also the Tremblay LRT. So my hope is that you would endorse this and, if possible, expedite approval of this project after the EA. The second question it relates to climate change, and I'm going to echo what everybody says. We need to have more funding for not just the funding for energy evolution, but really, given the emergency, climate funding has to be a priority and a lens through which decisions are made, and more active transportation and greening things rather than roads and sprawl. So one small area of doing it is that the city talks about is the tree canopy. And I know that was part of the official plan, and I'm not an expert on the tree canopy, but I know that with intensification and other things, there are going to be trees lost. And the city, one of the things that's important, and I've seen this in various places around the city will plant trees, which is great, but then there isn't sufficient funding to maintain and water them so they're healthy. So basically, the trees, a lot of the trees die unnecessarily, which is, at the end of the day, it's a waste of money in trees planted that didn't have a chance. And also it reduces the greenhouse gas absorption. So I would just encourage you to, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are on increasing the budget for tree maintenance, and also supporting funding for the EA between the train yards and the Via Station LRT. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Councillors?
If I can, Kathy, briefly. Chris, thank you. Nice to see you. Yes, as you know, I absolutely support the overpass from train yards across the tracks to Via. And as I've said, it was part of my discussions with staff earlier this year that we fund the EA for that, the environmental assessment for that. I do expect to see it in the budget. I will know, and I was told it would be, we will know on November 3rd when the budget is tabled.
Did anybody have any questions about the tree canopy additional funding for tree maintenance?
I'll just add, it's investment in trees is peanuts when you look at the benefits that we get from them. You can probably easily list 8, 10, 12 benefits that trees provide. So I'll commit to looking at the numbers. I think it takes too long to get new trees replaced and replanted if they've had to come out due to death or other factors. And I mean, we're still recovering from the emerald ash borer. There's still places in River Ward that are being addressed now, many years after the fact, and that takes too long. So I do want to see a budget that can adequately respond and get trees planted, because again, the immediate investment is small when you look at the benefits that the community reaps. So I'll commit to look at the numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have our last question would be from Khulud B. If I can ask you to proceed and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question around, I have a couple of questions. My first question is around some of the comments that have been made earlier around cost of living that's going up, and why in the city of Ottawa do we not have a poverty reduction strategy or some sort of a strategy that kind of looks at all the various intersectional issues that residents are experiencing collectively? So whether that be like housing or cost of mobility or transit, access to services and supports. Like, I think it's just such a critical way to look at the lived experiences of people in the city, and it's just totally lacking. And then also, I think having a poverty reduction strategy also can play a part in seeing where the barriers are to access, and really investing in uplifting communities rather than surveilling and policing them, which for some reason continues to keep getting funding. And even though there has been so much advocacy from community and community people that we need to invest back into community rather than policing. So that's my first question. And then my second question is, I find that year after year, the budget consultation process continues to be very last minute, very close to the budget, and almost never preparing communities that are already vulnerable or marginalized to be present at these processes. So what and when is the city going to make a change in involving and incorporating more diverse voices in this process? So those are my two questions.
Who would like to start?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Well, so you're absolutely right, I think, about both of those points. I know Councillor King has been trying to advance a poverty reduction strategy. That just can't be an initiative of his. It needs to be all of ours. I know back in 2010 as well, the city had advanced one, but it's really didn't get the resources it needed and dwindled right from the get-go. So we do need to look at that, and it's holistic. And it has to do, obviously, that this is more strategic than just at local level. You need all orders of government working towards it, but the city is where these things really can take shape, where you can have care and love for people that can translate into real resources in coordinating all orders of government and what they currently offer. So and expanding on those. So I think it is coming. I know Councillor King has been doing a lot of work to advance a poverty reduction strategy. I think it's supposed to come forward. I believe this year is when he's bringing some of these pieces forward. Certainly we'll be supporting that, and the city has to get behind it as well and actually put funding behind it to make it real and work. And then in terms of you're right. Our budget priorities are so out of whack, to be honest with you. I mean, we do have a lot of money that is being spent on urban boundary expansion. We're about to do that. That'll be hundreds of millions into the billions of dollars over time. It's over $400 per person per year to expand the urban boundary in the city of Ottawa. Our police budget has grown. It has tripled in the last 20 years. Road expansion continues and is extremely expensive. You can look at the public-private partnerships that we've been signing and the amount of money that goes there and the doubling of our debt. So, I have to say, I agree with you that there needs to be a reallocation of these types of priorities and funding towards what matters, which is our people. And we haven't been doing a good enough job of I think, attenuating those sorts of priorities, and more needs to be done. And I agree with Councillor Deans. A lot of that likely won't change until we see a big change and shift in council priorities, which I suspect will come next term. So I appreciate the intervention, and keep fighting, keep pushing for change in the city, for care for all people.
Maybe if I could just add one thing to what Shawn said, and that is the city has been actively engaging the public in building a community safety and well-being plan, which is mandated by the province. And there has been a lot of engagement. It just came to the Community and Protective Services Committee in the last cycle. And one of the pillars of the community safety and well-being plan is financial security and poverty reduction. So it's certainly on the radar of the city, and we recognize the priority of that. But priorities are one thing. Having the will to fund it properly is another. The community safety and well-being plan is mandated by the province, but they haven't sent any funding to go along with the mandate. So within existing budgets, we have to prioritize to find ways to fund our priorities that we've identified through the community safety and well-being plan. But certainly poverty reduction and financial security are a key pillar in that plan.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone for sticking around. It is now 10 to 9, and I'd like to proceed to the closing remarks from, I'd like to invite councillors to share their final thoughts on budget 2022. We will begin with Councillor Brockington, followed by Councillors Cloutier, Deans, and Menard. J'invite chaque conseiller à partager leur réflexion finale sur le budget 2022. Nous commencerons avec le conseiller Brockington, suivi par les conseillers Cloutier, Deans et Menard. Over to you, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Fisher. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight, to Deputy Treasurer Jasmine for the presentation, my colleagues as well, but particularly for local residents for your questions and comments. It did feel rushed tonight. I feel like I'm out of breath, and encourage anyone to follow up with your local councillor to reiterate or to underscore points that you've raised tonight. My budget process is done annually. I think Councillor Cloutier said that we converse with our residents on an annual basis, and I get more things done actually throughout the year working with city staff emphasizing to them why certain needs in my community are important, trying to triage them, trying to find money from different budget buckets to get things done. And it's difficult to change the budget. It's difficult to put motions forward. I do think that's a drawback from our budget. It shouldn't be, when we have priorities, be so difficult to get that done. And I do think that there will be change the next term, but I want people who feel discouraged to know that, similar to when I campaign and I create a list of 30 or 40 pages of issues, I can't get them all done in the first year. It's a process. And the same thing with budget requests, is that they are noted. Some can be actioned right away. Some take more time, working with staff, planning them out, seeing when priorities are going to be addressed over time. So I want you to know that you have been listened to, and some things just take a little bit more time to be addressed. I do want to touch on one point, and that is COVID. We knew that in our at-risk communities, there were a number of issues. And what COVID is, it further exposed the vulnerabilities of many households in the city of Ottawa, and how unprepared we are for a shock like COVID, when people's economic viability is threatened, when their housing is threatened. The city has to react and have a plan. And so hopefully we can learn from COVID and be stronger and better going forward. But it certainly exposed a number of vulnerabilities in this city. But again, thank you for everything that's been raised tonight. I have 3 pages of notes that I've taken, and I have committed to following up with a number of residents. And please keep engaged, and please contacting your local councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Conseiller Cloutier.
Merci. Thank you. And again, thank you, Kathy and Isabel and finance staff for being here tonight. And thank you to my council colleagues, Councillor Brockington, Deans and Menard, for being here. And thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and spent time with us. It's always valuable to have these discussions, these ongoing discussions. And I'm always left with a lot of information, like Councillor Brockington, to take away. Councillor Brockington said we discuss on an annual basis. If that's what I said, I may have misspoke. I meant we discuss on an ongoing basis, and I don't know if I misspoke or you misspoke. Nonetheless, budgeting goes on all the time. Heard about tax increases, heard about roads, transit, paratransport, the environment, and particularly pleased to hear the broad call for environmental change. It's the city where we live, and we've heard that tonight, and we need to put it on an even keel, if I could use that term. We're hearing more and more of that. It's refreshing. Budgeting is always a challenge. We have limited resources, unlimited needs. It is the basic macroeconomic problem. Limited resources, unlimited needs. To echo what Councillor Brockington said, if anyone from Alta Vista Ward wants to speak more on these and other issues, I too took lots of notes. Please connect with me, call me, email me, my team, so that we can continue that discussion. Merci à tous qui se sont déplacés virtuellement pour être ici ce soir. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to share your priorities with us. Thank you.
Merci, Conseiller Cloutier. Councillor Deans, over to you.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for a great job of moderating tonight's event. And thanks to Isabel Jasmine for the presentation, and to the finance staff that are here tonight. And of course, thank you to my colleagues. We've been doing this together for a number of years now, and I appreciate all of them. And I think we work very well together. So it's nice to continue this tradition. I just wanted especially to say thank you to all of the people who engaged with us tonight and gave up your evening to be part of the city building process that we've been involved in. Some of my takeaways from tonight is that the number one issue that emerged for me was the climate emergency and ensuring we're investing sufficient resources to address climate change in the city of Ottawa. I think we all heard that loud and clear. We also heard insufficient transportation network that requires greater greater investments, challenges with the conditions of the road and our LRT system, the high cost of living and the housing emergency, and we should be investing more in the priorities of the community and the priorities we as a city have set. I think we heard your messages loud and clear. We appreciate you sharing those with them. We heard lots of other issues too, and I think what we really heard was the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the complex issues that go into a city. And so I would just encourage all of you to continue engage in the budget process as we move through from the tabling on the 3rd of November to the setting of the budget later in November. We all have to work together to build the city that we want, and we appreciate your input into this, and we will all strive to build the best budget that we can for 2022 and the years beyond. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I'll be quick. I'll just offer some advice on how to change the process, how to get some things through this next budget. So the committee meetings that happen is where changes can occur. And requests can be made. That's your best bet. Committee of the whole, there'll be some motions that come forward based on, as I say, many different people saying the same sort of thing to several councillors. For committees, though, that are coming up in November, the best way to do it is actually to find a council sponsor and start to draft a motion with that person. They think the People's Official Plan has done great work, but begin to draft a motion. Say, look, this is what I'm looking for. I've looked at the budget. Here's an area where I think we can, where we need some help, and start to draft it. Get it in early. Get it in a week or two before the committee. That councillor that can then sponsor free will send it into staff and say, look, can we do anything on this? You may get something. Might not be everything, but there might be something that can be done to change it. So I'd recommend that the committees that meet in November, those are the important ones to get your voice heard and to try to make changes there. As I say, very little changes from the budget is released to the end product. However, it is an election year. Maybe there's going to be more willingness to change things before 2022. I hope that is the case. So that's my best advice in terms of trying to get some changes on specific items, is go to those committees. And I just want to thank my colleagues. It's really a pleasure to work with them. And all of the people that have shown up here, 58 of you, 56 of you have stayed, 2 have left since my little finishing speech here. So I better shut up. And thanks very much for Kathy and for Isabel and our staff, Nathan, and others that joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Well, thank you all for joining us and for sharing your feedback. Alors, merci de vous joindre à nous ce soir et de partager vos commentaires. C'est très bien apprécié. And with that, I bid you all a good night. Adieu.
Thank you all, everyone. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Kathy.
You're welcome.